It's always nice to see that the room on this topic has a good combination of men and women. Otherwise, we'll be preaching to the converted. So welcome to everybody. You know, I was supposed to introduce them, but I think it's better if I just pass the mic on to them for them to just introduce a little bit about themselves, and we'll go deeper into what they do and how they've been working on this very important topic, which is defending women's rights, which is, you know, with this year's theme of Balance for Better, and we have IWD every year, and I'm thinking, how long more must we have this conversation, you know, about balance for better, about all these things? It is great that we are celebrating womanhood, but topics like this, equality, defending women's rights, how much longer, right? And it gets frustrating at the same time. But that's not about me. I'll pass on to Anne-Cécile first to maybe introduce yourself.
Thank you very much. Thank you everybody for coming tonight. So I'm Anne-Cécile Mailfert. I'm the president of the Fondation des Femmes. The Fondation des Femmes is the only foundation in France funding feminist activities and women's rights and the fight against violence. So we support women's organizations with financial support, but also legal support, because we have gathered more than 100 of lawyers who do pro bono work for these organizations. And we also do what we call material support, because we have some space where women rights organizations can have offices, and so we try to make women's rights have a bigger impact, an even bigger impact in France.
Shareena? Yes.
Hello, I'm Shareena from Sisters in Islam. Thank you for having me and Sisters in Islam here today to talk about our journey. I'm in the advocacy and legal research. We in Sisters in Islam, we work on the area of women's human rights within the framework of Islam. Islamic family laws applies differently to Muslim women compared to the civil laws applying to non-Muslim women in Malaysia. We also work within the framework of the Constitution and human rights principles, as well as bringing forward the lived realities of women in Malaysia into areas such as policy making, law reform, etc. We also have a legal service that we provide, a free legal service specifically targeted to Sharia laws. So we have Islamic family laws and we have Sharia criminal laws in Malaysia. And women and men, Muslim and non-Muslim, come and seek advice because, you know, all can be affected by Sharia laws. And this service is provided by our in-house legal team together with some pro bono lawyers as well. And I think we can go further into our work later.
All right. Shareena, so Sisters in Islam has been around since what, 1984?
The late 80s, yeah.
The late 80s, yeah. And the genesis of why it started. Of course, your work has piled on since then, but the genesis of why it first started.
Yeah. Well, it's a story of a few women who started having a lot of inquiries about how the laws, the Sharia laws in particular, affected them and you know, their rights. There was a sense of injustice, and a lot of women started asking, started questioning, saying that if Islam is a religion of fairness and justice, then why do I feel that I am not receiving that justice? And so from there, the journey started. There were academics, Sharia academics, there were journalists, there were activists, there were artists, all within this founding group of ladies. And they decided that the only way to go about it is to go back to the religion. One fundamental principle that they had was that even as they were feminists, they were not willing to reject their faith. So they wanted to be a feminist within the religion of Islam, and they saw no reason why it should be contradictory. And so that was the framework that they worked on. They went back to the Quran, they went back to the Sunnah, the words and the actions of the Prophet. They re-looked at again, they went back to the jurisprudence, and they have come up with a feminist lens of looking at the Quran and the teachings of the Quran and what the Quran wanted for women and humanity as a whole. So that really led to the creation of new knowledge, groundbreaking knowledge. It was one of the first movements in the world that dared to question religion from the perspective of how it delivered justice and fairness to women in today's day and age, the realities that women face today and how religion is supporting and progressing our reality. And from there, Sisters in Islam's knowledge now is being transferred globally. So we are, through one of our founder members, Zaina Anwar, now has started a global movement. It's called Musawa, where she is sharing this knowledge that was started in Sisters in Islam with other organizations in the Middle East, in Africa and other parts of the world, in order to keep this movement alive and make it more of a global journey for Muslim women and Muslims generally, as well as, you know, those that interact. I mean, Islam is the fastest growing religion, so it's relevant for everyone in the world, really.
Anne-Cécile, why did you start the foundation in 2016? What was missing in the French landscape?
We can have the impression, or it's not just an impression, that we can see that France actually has made a lot of progress regarding women's rights. We have equality in the law, in the constitution. We have laws prohibiting violence against women. We have laws promoting the presence of women in the political area, in the economical area, etc. So this is good. But then when we look at the reality, then we can see that there is still a lot of inequality in the salaries, that women are still not in power, that there is still a lot of violence against women. So that means that we haven't done everything that should be done, because clearly the situation isn't great. It's even terrible when it comes to women being killed, femicides, because there is still a very high rate of femicides, and it has been increasing in the last month. So there is an urgency there, and we need to find solutions. So I was an activist, I was a feminist activist, and I was, like fighting in organizations where we do a lot of activism, demonstration, petitions, etc. And I was looking at the organizations helping women, and I was saying that they didn't have a lot of money to do what they were doing, that they didn't have a lot of lawyers to defend women, that women didn't really use the laws we were fighting for. And so I thought that maybe if we could create the Fondation des Femmes, the Women's Foundation, we could help equality become a reality by increasing the money, by providing legal resources. We could make a step further towards equality. So I thought that we should do that, and we should stop fighting with there's a French expression, I don't know if it exists in English, which says fighting with a wooden spade. Fighting with it's like, like fighting with, it's hard to fight with a wooden spade. So, yeah, I believe that maybe, if we create a foundation and raise money, maybe some people would be okay to give money to defend women's rights and to fight against violence against women, and maybe that money could be fairly used and well used by those organizations to make a real change. So this is why we created the foundation in 2016, and we have so we have grown. So yeah.
Personally, you've been involved in women's rights from a very young age. What was your story? I mean, how did you get started on this? And of course, I want to ask you that as well. But like for you, how did you get started on this whole journey of being?
Well, first, I think that I have my personality is kind of rebellious. I don't like people to give me orders that I don't understand. I don't see why I shouldn't have the same as my brother, because apart from a little part of our bodies, we're pretty the same. So why shouldn't I be allowed to what he does? And so this has been like this. Like, this is my personality. I don't like things that are not fair. I don't like injustice. And I speak out. So I'm anxieuse in French. So I tried. And I involved in different causes, like fighting for the environment, and then, little by little, my experience as a woman showed me that I didn't have to look for a cause to save children in Africa or whatever, that actually women in France, myself, we were in a situation that was really not fair, and that I should be taking care of this. And so the cause of women really came to me. I mean, because I am a woman and because I suffered like what I think any woman can suffer in the world, discrimination, violence. And so, I thought that maybe I should start just by fighting for women, because I'm pretty much aware of the situation, and this is how I started being a feminist.
Shareena, yours was the corporate career.
Yes, I was fully entrenched in a corporate career. But I think growing up as a Muslim Malay girl, even with very progressive parents, I was lucky to have them guide me along. But everywhere around you, you see, the discrimination that happens simply because you're a different gender, for the simple reason that you're a girl, a woman, and then having children and your career prospects, one after another. I think you feel that discrimination, sexual harassment at work, it all happened. I think every woman experiences it sometime in their life. And so, yeah, something, came to a point where I felt it was time to look further into this, to do something, make a difference in whatever small way that I could. I found Sisters in Islam, and they gave me a voice, so... Yeah.
Anne-Cécile, the Women's Foundation, what you do, you're talking about raising funds, right? So you raise funds for the promotion of equality between men and women, fighting against violence, and for women's rights. How do you decide which ones to fund and causes? What's the process of evaluation?
We try to be as useful as possible to make big change happen for women. So the first ones we need to listen to are the organizations on the ground. So we gather them once a year and we tell them, look, this year we might have 500,000 euros. How do you think we should use them? It's not a lot of money, but still it's already a nice amount of money. We can do things with that money. So what do you think? What have you seen on the ground? What is the most urgent thing that we should be tackling, the most urgent issue? And so they tell us, the women group tell us, like they tell us the first year they said, we should tackle violence against young women because they are forgotten in the public policies in France. The second year, they said we should tackle access to justice because women don't know their rights. And every year what we do after that is that we say, okay, that's a very good idea, so we take this idea and then we write a call for proposal and we say, okay, so now if any organization in France has a project answering that problem, then they can submit the project, and then we have a council made of experts that know very well the women's rights sector in France, but are not involved in organizations, so they can be expert but not biased. And they study the different propositions and they decide where the money is going to go. So this is the way that we do to make sure that our money is going to the right direction without being biased. And then when it comes to monitoring, we try to be very careful to not, we're not giving huge grants. We're giving like the biggest grant must be like 30,000 euros. So clearly, with that money, you can do stuff, but we cannot expect feminist organizations to write us reports every 3 months on what's happening with the money and what they're doing and the number of that and that. Because if we do that, then they will use the money to fill nice reports and to make nice videos and nice pictures to make us happy, but they will not focus on the woman they need to help. So we try to be very careful on the way we are using the money so that we don't, we try to keep focus on our goal is women. Our goal is not to make our donors happy. Our goal is to make women happy. So we're careful. So we ask for reports, but we don't try to, we don't know.
And these grants, they're coming from corporations, they're coming from individuals. Where's the money coming from?
The money is coming from individuals mostly. So we have, so all the money we're giving to women's organizations is coming from individuals. And we're very proud of that. And our salaries and our offices and our computers are funded by companies. Right. So that when somebody is giving us money, like an individual, right, they know that 100% of that money is actually going to organizations. So it's a very nice promise, it's a nice pledge that we're making to the donors. We're saying 100% of your money is going on the ground, directly helping women. And the corporation, they kind of sponsor us, right, and sponsor our development.
Right. And for Sisters in Islam, it's largely NPO, it's a non-profit organization. So in terms of funding, any corporations willing to come in? I mean, and I know the government has just recently come in with something at least, yeah.
Most of our funding is from international donors. We have a lot of difficulty actually having domestic funding, unfortunately. We're very well favored by the international community, but not the domestic community. Like you mentioned, on International Women's Day, we published a set of statistics that we've done, and this is the second year doing it. Statistics of the clients that we manage and what kind of issues they are facing, and how the law has impacted them in a very biased manner. So issues like custody, maintenance, polygamy, divorce under Sharia laws. And it was launched by the Deputy Minister for Women, Hannah Yeoh, and she was very encouraging, and she thought that data compilation was the cornerstone of showing evidence for policy change and legal reform. And so she decided to support us by giving us a donation, and it was made public, and it was very vehemently opposed by the opposition political party. So things like this keep, I think, is a regular thing for sisters in Islam because of the space that we have, you know, the space that we have made for ourselves. This is part of the challenge that we face on a regular basis.
You remember last year what they were referred to as deviant. Now, I understand that Sisters in Islam is planning to do a study in equality, and can you share a little bit about what's that study all about?
Yeah. So from year to year, we see issues like divorce rates rising, a lot of issues related to communication, financial issues, and it all works around the issue of either men not contributing enough or women feeling that they're contributing unfairly, and it's because the Sharia law works on the basis of complementarity of rights, which means that a man has certain functions, in return a woman has certain functions. A man has a function to put the bread on the table, in return the wife gives complete obedience. This is the basis of Sharia laws. So our focus, our objective is to change these sets of rights into equality, equal rights within a marriage, within a family. Until today, a Muslim woman can never have legal guardianship over her children. Only a man and his relatives can have legal guardianship over his children. A woman can only have custody but not legal guardianship. A woman can never grant citizenship to her children. So where she marries a foreigner. So there are so many biases within the legal system that disallow women their natural rights as a mother and as a guardian. So the crux of the issue is the interaction between men and women, the sharing of responsibilities, the compromise in responsibilities and expectations of each other within the marriage and things like that. So equality is very much a very new concept in Islam. Islam, I think, in its traditional form is a very patriarchal religion. And so changing that concept and changing the mindset that goes with it is our objective at the end of it.
Anne-Cécile, you have a very interesting, you managed to link up with 175 lawyers in France willing to work pro bono to ensure that the rights guaranteed to women in French laws are actually implemented. So how did you manage to do that, right? And getting lawyers pro bono,
Getting people work for free for me. Actually, what they're doing is that they're changing the world. They're making it a better place for themselves and for their daughters and sons. And, what better use of your life can you make, of using your life to make things better for the next generation. And I think it's just that, I think I'm making them happy because they're actually helping women, helping women's rights, and helping others makes you happy. There's scientific research saying that. It's not just that, it's true. I believe that I'm very lucky to have this cause, even though some days I'm very sad because like you said at the beginning, things are not changing fast enough, etc., etc. But at the end of the day, I'm very happy myself because what I'm doing is very useful. And so I think all these lawyers, some of them are like working every day on financial stuff or writing contracts for companies, very boring work. So with me, they're just changing the world, and it's much more exciting and much more fun. We are winning cases, we are making progress. I don't know, that's the way they work for me. They work for the Fondation des Femmes is just with that. I think that's the compensation. The compensation is that they're using their brain and their talent and their expertise to make a big change in the world. Yeah.
It was easy convincing the lawyers to do this. It was easy. I'm sure it was not so easy in the beginning. How was that conversation? How did it start?
Well, first we funded the Fondation des Femmes with some female lawyers. And so, because they also experienced, everything we're talking about. When you're a woman, and when you're not blind, you actually can, see that the world is not entirely fair to women. So they wanted the Fondation des Femmes to exist, and they started themselves to. And so we expanded, they brought their friends, and the friends brought their friends, and now we have some recognition, we won some awards on the legal work that we're doing, some people kind of know us, and now people are asking us to work for free. So, yeah.
Now, Shareena, you were involved in work relating to, as you mentioned, injustices experienced by women as a result of biased laws, policies, and institutional structures. So are these archaic laws that have not changed, or are they in place in recent history? I mean, how does that work?
So we inherited most of our patriarchal laws from our colonial masters. And they have progressed to move. For example, if you look at marital rape was brought in by the British rule, guardianship, the fact that women cannot have guardianship over children, that was brought in by British rule. But obviously, Britain has moved along, changed their laws. But in Malaysia now, we are using religion as one of the reasons to keep it, from changing. So that is, I think unbundling the issue, showing where it started. It's nothing to do with the religion. It has different. It came from somewhere else. But it's been translated into Sharia laws, and just talking about institutions. If you look at a domestic violence case, from the simple thing of reporting it to the police, and the police will tell you, oh, it's a domestic issue, we don't want to get involved, can you please go home and sort it out with your husband? And then you go to a hospital if there's been bruises and all, and the doctor doesn't want to report it because it's a domestic issue. And then you go to court and it's the same issue, and your lawyer will not believe you, your judge will question you to see whether, the veracity of the truth of it, and it goes on and on. It's a whole systemic issue within the country, because I think this is the bias that is within the whole structure of the institutions. I think not just in Malaysia, but probably across the world. And I think there are success stories. To start off, I think the women's movement became very strong when we were fighting for the Domestic Violence Act. So when we started off, domestic violence was not a law in Malaysia in the 1980s. And then when it gained traction, what happened was that they wanted to leave Muslim women out, because they said, oh, in Islam, Muslim men can beat Muslim women, right? And can beat their wives. And so that was another struggle, advocacy that we had to go through, but we got the laws passed. And today, on average, everyone accepts that violence within, the domestic environment is not an acceptable, is a crime. So, in that way, mindsets have changed on the issue of violence, domestic violence in particular. And now we're changing our minds on sexual harassment. We're changing our minds on cyber harassment. And, a lot of harassment on women happens through social media, for example. So there can be progress if there is legal reform, policy change, a government political will. There can be change, but you know, in certain areas which they consider very sensitive, like religion and how women must be submissive to their men, or you know, this kind of issues, that change is very, very slow in Malaysia.
What about some of the laws around violence in France?
In France, we have a pretty good set of laws, even if we could ameliorate it. But the issues we have is that they're not really used, not sufficiently. Let me get you an example. We have, for instance, it's prohibited to incitate, to call for violence against women. Yet, a lot of singers are singing terrible things about violence against women. You can see also in some movies and some speeches, and even if, like, on the internet, you know, there is cyberbullying, and some men are clearly pushing violence against women. But nobody has never filed a complaint on that law, and so there has never been any men convicted for calling for violence against women. And I could tell you a few of those laws that are good laws, but just nobody's using them. And nobody's using them because, mostly because they're not known, and so what we do with our lawyers is that we do what we call strategic litigations. So we look at those laws and we say, oh, that's a good one, so we should use it, and we should make the first complaint that goes all the way to the conviction, so we have a good jurisprudence that can open the way for all women in France. So this is one of the reasons. So the law is not used, but then it's not the only problem on violence against women. The other problem is that you cannot fight violence against women if you don't put money on the table, because you will need, once they will leave their home because there is violence in their home, you will need money to build shelters. And to make sure that the shelters is not only a roof, but that there is social workers in the shelter to help the woman to go back to work and to feel better, to ameliorate, etc. So, in France, there is a clear lack of money on the table, and that leads to real problems, such as since the beginning of January. There has been an increase in femicide, so in women being killed by their intimate partner. So we are up to 31 women being killed since the 1st of January. Last year at the same time it was 19. So do the math. It's like 50%, it's a 50% increase. This is like terrible, and nobody, and the government's like, oh my God, what's happening? Well, what's happening is that when they go to the police to fill the complaint, because everybody with the Me Too movement, everybody is saying, you should speak out, you should go to the police, speak out, you should leave your husband. So, okay, they feel confident and they do it. The problem is that when they leave their husband and when they go to the police, it's the exact moment where they are at risk of being killed by their husband. It's when they start to leave and defend themselves that the violence can explode. So it's like the first weeks of when she leaves, you know, this is where the man will be furious and will prefer to destroy the woman instead of her being free. So you will be mine forever. This is the way they're thinking. If I destroy you, I'll make sure that you'll be mine forever. I don't want you to be free. I don't want you to be with another man. I don't want you to fight for your rights. I want you to be mine forever. So they kill them. So when there is not enough money, that means that the police officers are not trained on how to receive a woman's complaint. they do not protect them. So, for instance, they will say that, like the last one who was killed, she filed 5 complaints. 5 times she went to the police. Her father filed 5 complaints also. The husband had a gun, okay? So, and she went to the police and say, he has a gun. He's going to use it against me. I'm telling you, I'm sure of this. And the police say, oh, we can't do anything, which is not true. Of course they can do something about it. And so she said to her friends, they will do something once I'm dead. And she died, and she was killed. So her husband killed her with his gun. And so this is where, this is a situation in France where, okay, we have laws, we're telling girls that they should speak out, and then we don't do we don't invest. We don't put money on the table to protect them, to make sure that their rights are actually respected, that they're safe when they leave their homes. And this is, I think the main issue regarding violence against women in France is how we make sure that we are actually changing the real life of real women. And this requires an effort from the society. It cannot change just with a nice speech from the president. It should be, the president should speak out, but the government should also allocate a substantial budget on that issue.
You were saying, was it last year where cyberbullying, and you were witness to that? I think that was a very interesting story, and that was a victory. That was a victory. You can share that story with us.
Yeah, we have victories too. We deal with very sad subjects, but sometimes we're very happy to. So, so cyberbullying is an issue for any feminist activist, and in Malaysia even more. But in France too, cyberbullying is really a way of shutting down feminists, not just feminists, but particularly the feminists. And so a few years ago, I denounced a painting that was in a hospital where it was like the representation of a rape, and it was in the room of doctors, because in France they have this, what's called the carabin. Well, it's a culture of doctors, and they say that because they're facing death every day, then they need to joke about sex. I don't know how it is in Malaysia, but in France they say that you cannot be a doctor if you don't make jokes about sex. It's like, okay, well, I'm sure there's other part of the world where you can actually be a doctor without joking about sex, but so not in France. And their jokes are really difficult to understand. So that was a joke about a woman, and she was a Wonder Woman. You know Wonder Woman? This superheroine. So she was in the middle, and she was raped by 5 other superheroes. That was the painting on the wall. And she was representing the Ministry of Health, which was actually a woman at that time, and she was also the Minister of Women's Rights. So of course my job was to denounce that, because it's just not possible to have this in a public hospital. These doctors are actually helping women to feel better, and then they go back to their room and you see that. It's like, okay, not possible. So I just denounced that on the social media, and the doctors, there were like hundreds, starting to bully me on internet. They published my personal telephone number, and they called me, and I could receive like every 2 minutes a call from a doctor saying, hello, my name is Henry, and I'm a doctor in Grenoble, and I'm telling you, you have to stop, you have to go back, and that's a very polite way, they were not polite. So they insulted me, they published Photoshop stuff, with my head on different types of bodies, naked, and anyway. And so they really insulted me really seriously during a few days, until I said in the media, okay, I'm filing a complaint, this has to stop. And it was the first complaint for insulting a woman for being a woman, like sexist insulting and cyberbullying. And the judgment was just last year, and we won. So that was the first case, and we were very happy because we make a jurisprudence on the fact that you cannot tell a woman she's a whore just because you disagree with her. Like, you can tell her that she's an idiot, that she's not right, but don't refer to her whatever, womanhood stuff. And so that was a very good victory, and we were very happy about it. And it hasn't stopped cyberbullying yet, but we are on the way.
Shareena, do you see younger women taking part in initiatives by Sister in Islam? Do you see that happening? Are we progressing? Are we regressing? What are you seeing now?
I think it's a very complex space for the younger generation. So we've had a few surveys done on young, especially young Muslims under 30, and they show to be the most conservative in terms of their religious, the way they practice faith. They are comfortable being polarized within their religion. They are comfortable being racially polarized and religiously polarized. And they think that it is their right. So it's back to this ketuanan Melayu, supremacy of the Malay and the Muslim. So that is, I think, something that the young feel very justified in that space. On the other hand, I think they have a lot of exposure to the global debate on human rights. They're very involved in the human rights discussion. I think the Me Too discussion was all about the younger generation. And you hear about whatever Michael Jackson and R. Kelly and whatnot, and it's always within their conversations. So they are curious about our work. But I think it's this balancing between religion and human rights, and some of them, manage to do it comfortably. So, they have them in their veil and looking in their jeans and all. I'm a modern Muslim and this is what I am. Or they completely reject it. And they go either very liberal and reject religion, or very conservative and reject, human rights. So it's a very complex space, I think, for the young in Malaysia right now, with the politics as it is.
Do you get younger women, joining Sisters in Islam or supporting Sisters in Islam? Do you see more people?
Yes, I think our space is, usually the women come to us when they are in contradiction, either with themselves, with their faith, or with the world at large. So we have a lot of women, and they come with us with a simple question. Why is Islam doing this to me? Very simple question. Why am I, being penalized like this because I am a Muslim? Because non-Muslims don't have to face this. Simple, issues like that. So they come to us when they hit a certain barrier where their reality doesn't fit with, what they're experiencing. So those are the kind of women who I think that's when they become unblind, right? When they start opening their eyes and start thinking that things must change because it's just not it's not right.
I'm going to ask one last question here, and then I'll open the floor for questions. When we think of advocacy, it's perceived as hard work and complicated, right? I think of the red tape and roadblocks, and I feel defeated before I even started. How can we get started on this advocacy journey? And I think just what can I do, a simple thing I can do, in this journey, defending women's rights, in getting to equality? What can I do?
Well, we tell women and men, claim this space. Don't let anyone else take this space, because, it is our right to speak up. It is our right to have our thoughts heard. We get a lot of pushback saying that if it's Islam, you don't have your veil on. You didn't study in Egypt or Al-Azhar or anything. You have no right to speak our religion. And we tell them, this is the law. This is the public policy. I am affected. I have every right to speak about it. So claim your space, whatever, you feel you need to be heard. I think that, the Women's March is a simple area, simple example where women did claim their space, and you see intimidation. You see, but we keep fighting back. We keep making our voices heard. It's very important. It's very tiring. It's very tiring. It can be very demoralizing, but also I think community building is very, very important in the women's movement. So there is a lot of mutual support from men and women around us. If you feel like you're flailing a little bit, someone will come and pick you up. That's very important as well, because there's a lot of very harsh abuse that comes the way of human rights defenders, especially women human rights defenders. So I think you get a lot of criticism on social media. Our friends have received rape threats, car windows broken. I think Maria Chin had this viral, with the Al-Qaeda looking man with the mask and axe, was it? Yeah. So all these things are serious threats, and you would worry about your children and all, but that camaraderie is something that keeps us going, yeah.
And if you don't have the soul of a hero, you might have some money you can give to Sister in Islam, for instance. If you can, I think a donation can be small, can be big, and to help them do the great job they're doing here in Malaysia. And then it depends on your job. You're a journalist, so you have a voice. You can help a lot of people to understand better what sexism is and how dangerous it is for a woman. Then you might be also a mother, so you can raise your kids in a manner where, violence against women could be stopped in one generation if all the parents taught their son not to beat their future wife. That's as simple as that. So this is something you can do also. And of course, if you have the energy and time and the strength, you can, you can of course speak out. But it's not always that easy. So what I say to women is that, trust yourself. If you feel you're not safe, don't speak out. You know better than anybody when you can speak out and to who you can speak out. So trust yourself, and when you will have, feel that it's the space and the time, do speak out, and open yourself to the person that will be listening to you.
Okay, we'll open the floor for questions. Raise your hand. Okay, we've got one question.
Bonsoir, merci beaucoup. Yeah, my French is not very good. Stop here. Thank you for the talk. I found it very, very interesting. I'm very happy to see Sisters in Islam again. Might meet again in the future. I have one very, 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 very important question, a very short question for our French guest, Miss Anne-Cécile. Did they remove the painting or did they not?
They did. They had to.
How fast was it?
Just like a few days after. Yeah, it was a big scandal in France, so yeah, they had to remove it. Yeah, that was a big victory for us.
Very good.
Hi, firstly, I would like to thank our panelists for sharing your experiences. I have two questions. So the first question is to Ms. Mailfert. What do you think of some celebrities, French celebrities, for example, Catherine Deneuve, is that how you pronounce her name? She criticized the Me Too movement and said that women were overreacting and people don't know how to flirt anymore, something like that. So what do you think about these celebrities' reactions to the Me Too movement? And my second question is, in both your jobs or perhaps your work with other women organizations, are there any efforts to address the root causes of discrimination towards women? Are there any efforts to educate boys and girls on gender issues and women's rights and basically respect for all and things like that? Yeah, thank you.
Catherine. Yeah, well, I felt sorry for her, actually, because it was really, how can I say that? So it's, so that everybody can understand what we're talking about, it was during the Me Too movement, there was a lot of debate on what is sexual harassment, and a lot of girls were, in France, girls and women were speaking out and like telling their experience, and so, and we have in France a culture of seduction. I don't know if you're all aware about that myth of, you know, the French lover. So we have this ideal of, you know, the French romance, the French lover, and how, you know, French men are so charming, and, you know, women instantly fell in love with them. So this culture, actually, there is a lot of problems with these ideas, because we have this ideal in France too, that in France we have a liberty of flirting, and that women are free and men are free and everybody is happy and they all sleep with each other, and it's, well, actually that would be actually okay with me. The problem is that behind that, what's hidden behind the French lover is actually a man who cannot stop thinking about having sex with every woman like he crosses, you know? So we're not women to them, we're just sexual objects. And so, you know, some men flirt like all the time. It's like, can you just stop flirting? I'm talking to you, like, please speak to my brain. I see I'm not the only one in the room that ever crossed the way of a French lover. Yeah, it's how, with this culture, a lot of women also are trapped with this culture, because they believe that they are interesting because they do that flirting too, and that because they are pretty and they keep being pretty, and it's a way of also achieving, you know, things in France. So, and they believe that it's okay when it's not okay, actually, because they should never be considered for their body; they should be considered for their minds. And so this culture is actually a big problem. And so what Catherine Deneuve was saying when she was saying that we should let the freedom of importuner, the freedom of disturbing women, I don't know what's the translation in English. We tried to find it earlier, we didn't find it. I don't know if anyone has the real translation. It's basically we should let the men be free to tickle us, or to, you know, like, yeah. Whereas our point during the Me Too movement was to say seduction is okay because seduction is reciprocal, and there's nothing wrong with that. The problem with harassment it becomes harassment when it's not reciprocal. So when a woman is sending the message that it's a no, just respect that. And that will make the difference between a seductive man and an harasser or an aggressor. So, this is what Catherine Deneuve couldn't get. I don't know why she couldn't get it, but what we were doing during the Me Too movement was really to liberate seduction from harassment and say, be free to flirt, whatever you want to flirt, just don't harass women. And yeah. So that was the Catherine Deneuve tribune. But at least I think that I can thank her, because thanks to that tribune, thanks to that paper, we could discuss the subject openly. Because of course that was the main problem in France. A lot of men were like against Me Too movement because they thought, oh my God, I'm going to go to jail because I've been flirting. Well, no, you can keep flirting, you just cannot harass women. And thanks to that paper, we could discuss that issue and make them feel more relaxed about, yeah.
What was the other question again? Voice, educating voice.
I think at least in our sessions, we have a lot of outreach programs, training, and information on rights of women and all. We do see more and more involvement, more and more interest from men, and that's a very positive development, because equality is about both men and women. Both have to, have a role to play. We've been engaging a lot with the government on the issue of sexual education. And it's not about, safe sex or anything, but it's also respecting each other's space and areas like what you're talking, the difference between flirtation and harassment. Because a lot of children, especially in their growing up years, they don't know the difference. They don't know, that they have the right to say no, or to remove themselves from situations where they might be afraid or uncertain, etc. In Malaysia, you're having young children very exposed and becoming sexually active at a very young age now. And then you're having parents who are very conservative, who will not talk about it, who will not discuss it with their children. And then they have schools that don't bring up the topic. Sex is about, you have your uterus, you have your, all the organs. It's biological. It's not the behavior related to it. So that's where you find a lot of difficulties that young children are facing. I think there were even surveys. They don't know that they can get. Girls don't know they can get pregnant from just one time. They don't know. Or we've even had a full-grown man who came and didn't know what to do once he got married. Very things that you would think are impossible in today's day and age, but there is absolutely no practical type of sexual education available within the public schools here, and it's fast becoming an issue because there's a lot of abuse happening within that age group.
Hi, I had a question for Anne-Cécile. I was just wondering if you also look at how you bridge the wage gap for women, especially women minorities or single mothers.
How do I, sorry, I couldn't.
How do you bridge the wage gap for single mothers or women minorities? Is that something that you guys work on as well?
We work on that. Indeed, it's not easy, and it's a real issue. There is, in France, the wage gap is 24% between men and women in general. So there is a 24% wage gap. But inside, what explains that? One big part of that difference of salary is that a lot of female workers are working part-time, mostly because they're raising their kids, sometimes because they're single mothers. And so it's difficult to address it as to find a magical solution, because what should be done is that the government should increase the sanctions for not respecting the equality of salaries between men and women. The government should increase the sanctions against companies who use an abuse of part-time in the female employment. The trade unions should fight for increasing the salaries on female work. There are most of the women are working on the children care or homework or these areas where the salaries are very low. Low. Law is something else. Okay, low. So it's difficult for us as a foundation to fund a project that is going to change, things in that aspect, because it really comes to the law and implementing the law and making sanctions bigger. So we did a little program on, trying to test whether if women were going to have more chances to get a job than men on certain jobs, etc. So we're raising attention, raising awareness, but then it's really a problem that the government should tackle stronger.
Thank you. So I have just one more question, if I may. This one's more for Shareena, I suppose. And my question is, how do you, let's say, persuade the government here in Malaysia, who I find tends to hide, whether it's behind religion or culture or tradition, as an excuse against women discrimination? How do you work with them?
Well, it's easier to work with this government than the last government. We have access. I think they have a good appreciation for human rights. I think when you look at human rights activists, you have to understand that they are not necessarily women's rights activists. So they may believe in democracy and, get rid of the corruption and all, but they don't believe in women empowerment, or at least they don't think it's high on the agenda or necessary to be high on the agenda. Working with them is all about Sisters in Islam brings a lot of new knowledge, develops a lot of new knowledge and brings it to the table. And in many cases, we have, I think, a core group in government that realizes that the Islam that we have in Malaysia is causing problems. And it's going to cause extremism, possibly violence in the future. I think there is a realization, there is a movement to inject moderation and tolerance into the Islamic administration. I think you can see reform of JAKIM, for example. They're coming down on Tabung Haji and all these other so-called religious institutions that were untouchable before this, but now they are being brought to answer for their misdeeds. So there is that movement, but I think you have to see that, and then there is the political rhetoric that they need to play the game, right? Opposition now, the strongest opposition is the Islamist Party. UMNO is extremely conservative and traditional in their religion and race issue as well. So they have that face to put up, perhaps, but at least on the table, they seem more receptive. So I don't have an answer. I think we hope for the best. We hope they open their minds. We hope in areas that they can move forward, they will move forward. And not too much is compromised for political expediency. We keep calling for political will to make change. But we also want this government to mature and be strong, you know, the opposition to this government is based on race and religion. I think that is the difficulty that this government is facing right now.
I have a question for Shareena. Just now you mentioned a little bit about the younger women and what you found in your research, the statistics, that they seem to be falling into the category of accepting of the submission to men, or something like that. Correct me if I'm wrong. So how, what do you think, why it caused this kind of mindset? I mean, to the younger ones, I'm just surprised to hear that as well.
Actually, the research showed it was not on women, on young women, but it was on young Muslims, and it just showed that they were more conservative than the people who were above 40. I think it's our education system. I think there has been indoctrination happening. There was a viral text going around to show how many Ugama classes, religious classes, there were in public schools. So there would be like 4 classes for math, English and science, and then there would be 5 on different aspects of the religion, because they've expanded the religious syllabus so broadly that, you know, one class, when I was in school, I think it was 2 classes a week. Now it's like 5 or 6 a week. And so at the expense of science and English and math, you're teaching something else, right? And the type of religion that is being taught is very much, it's a rote learning. It's a very, it's a religion about punishing. It's a religion about, you know, if you don't do this, then you'll end up in hell. If you do this, you'll have all the angels, you know, serving you in heaven. It's always about that, right? That is the religion that it's not based on developing faith anymore as it was before, and it doesn't invite critical thought. Things like that. So it's the way it's designed. And I think the other area is this pondok schools, you know, these religious schools, madrasas in other countries, but in Malaysia we have a lot of them in the cities and the villages, and it's become quite standard for the average Malay Muslim family to send their children to these schools, either after school or they don't go to public school and they just go to these religious schools. So more and more of these kind of students are within, amongst us. So it really is changing the dynamics of how religion is in Malaysia. You know, when we converse on the issue of religion, we always say Islam in Malaysia, because Islam in Malaysia is not like Islam anywhere else. If you look at Islam in Morocco, Islam in Tunisia, it's all different. And so how can you say that Islam in Malaysia is divine? This law is divine. Polygamy is divine. No, it's illegal in Morocco. It's not, you know, it's allowed under very limited circumstances in Indonesia, our nearest neighbor. So that argument doesn't hold water anymore. So it really is the Islam that we are trying to develop in Malaysia. Yeah.
If I may on that, in France we can see also a conservative wave in the youngest generations, and so I think that there is probably these circumstances here in Malaysia and the education system, but I also think that in the world in general, there is, I mean, let's face it, the world is going crazy, you know, like the planet, the environment, the finance, the artificial intelligence, it's all going so fast and it's also crazy, and the people living in different areas, and so when you're, I mean, any human needs an answer to a few questions like, what am I doing here? Why am I here? And these answers to those questions are not the ideologies that we knew in the 20th century anymore. Communism doesn't work. I mean, it's not working anymore for people, and we clearly see that capitalism is not doing such a fantastic job everywhere. So we need answers, and human race will always need answers to why am I here, what am I doing, what is the purpose of my life. And so religion and traditional values, whatever they are, Muslims or in France Catholics, they give you very reassuring, you know, very reassuring values. Oh, you're a woman, so this is what you're supposed to do. This is where you're supposed to go, and this is where you are on earth. So it's very reassuring, and I think we have to link it also to the global conservatism that is growing everywhere, and that is pretty scary, but is growing everywhere. And in France, it's scaring me too, you know. The young people are voting for the extreme right. And this is like, oh my God, if you start voting that when you're 20, like what's going to happen when you're 50 or 60 or 80? And this is something that didn't happen when I was 20, and I'm just 35. So in 15 years, there was this huge, you know, shift. And I think the social media are reinforcing this, because when you're on the social media, you are exposed to one type of news and one type of theory, and you just read what you want to read, and your friends are all the same, they all read the same stuff as you do, and so it's like reinforcing, and you go more and more radical. You know, in my Facebook, the world is feminist. It's amazing. And we all want to, you know, break down the patriarchy, and we're very fierce women. Well, that's not the world, it's just my Facebook. And but it's like this in all the different, I think in all the world, and it's probably why, you know, the Americans are voting for Trump, and the Brazilians are voting also for the extreme right, and this is why we should be very careful of what's coming in the next years in the different countries, not just in Malaysia but in Europe.
It's a question to our Malaysian friend. I was wondering if you work in connection with other organizations in Malaysia defending the rights of women, but not necessarily within the Muslim framework, and if you do, does that help to advance the cause, or are they totally different issues because of the difference in religion?
Yeah, so we work within a coalition of women's organizations. So there are about 13 well-known women's organizations within this coalition. One of them is WAO, Women's Aid Organization, Awam, Association of Women Lawyers, Justice for Sisters, that looks for that assists the LGBT women, LGBTQ community, and many more. So about 13 of us. Sabah and Sarawak also has organizations within this coalition. So that I mean, Muslim women, it's a subset of the women's movement generally. I think the women's rights movement is definitely larger than just the Muslim women's rights movement, but there is another layer of discrimination for Muslim women. Plus, because Muslim women are the majority, so we play a very large role within this coalition. So within this coalition, some of the very important agenda are like the gender equality bill that the government is talking about to introduce an all-encompassing legislation that acknowledges gender equality in all spaces, private, public work and public policy, etc. That's one area that they are looking at. Sexual harassment, child rights, these are areas that we as a coalition work together on.
With that, thank you so much, Anne-Cécile, Shareena. Thank you so much.
Thank you.